The evidence against Brian Hooker is mounting fast. We're going to break down all the new evidence and piece it together using forensic psychology to find out what really happened to his wife Lynette. Now, let's get started.
Day 2 of crossing the Gulf of Mexico.
We are crossing the Gulf of Mexico.
And Brian found the speaker. Do the foghorn. Pretty cool.
She basically just bounced off the dinghy in the middle of a little blow, like 20-some knot winds that popped up.
If you recall, Brian Hooker is the guy who claims his wife Lynette supposedly bounced out of their little dinghy raft boat when they were on their way to their sailboat on the evening of April 4th, and then magically Lynette got swept away out to sea and never to be seen again. Yeah, it seems quite improbable, and as we're finding out, that likely never happened.
There's history of him choking her out and threatening to throw her overboard. The fact that this is actually happening makes me believe there's more to the story.
On the back of that dinghy is a very small engine. It almost looks like it's a 2 or 4 horsepower. Do you know anything about that engine?
It's an electric engine. It goes only a couple knots.
Heading upriver on our electric dinghy.
Very slow. Not the kind of thing that you would bounce around.
She basically just bounced off the dinghy.
Have you ever seen anybody bounce out of that dinghy at the slow speed that it goes?
No.
We're now finding out that Lynette typically wears an Apple Watch. And if you're thinking, well, maybe you can just track the Apple Watch, which will track her, and you could find her.
Where he pushed her in, and before he did that, he took off her Apple Watch and threw it in. Because I don't feel like that would have just fell off.
Nope, amazingly, when Lynette fell out of the little dinghy raft boat, her Apple Watch magically fell off her wrist. Oh, yeah, that's probable. Yeah, she falls out of the dinghy, and then her Apple Watch just slips off her wrist at the same time.
With the broken oar or paddle, he could have hit her, and that's how it broke. There was a broken paddle, so maybe there could have been blood somewhere on the dinghy or something.
We're now finding out that one of Brian's paddles to his raft boat is broken or became broken and then now is missing.
He had lost an oar in the process.
He said he lost an oar?
That's what he told the police.
Do you know what could have caused a broken paddle? We're going to be discussing some of that later.
I'm happy to get some answers and I'm glad to see some video of my mom, her last moments. I just got to see her at the bar and walking down to the water, but that's about it.
We're now finding out that there's video surveillance footage of Brian and Lynette, at least at the Abaco Inn. However, it's not being released to the media yet, but we know that's also going to tell us a lot about what happened that evening between Brian and Lynette.
And the timestamp is 6:34 p.m.
They definitely was here after 6:30.
They definitely. Well, there's a picture of them at 6:34.
However, we do have this photo of Lynette's last proof of life at 6:34 p.m. at the Abaco Inn. And look at their body language and see what you think you notice. Yes, first, they're all alone by the pool. No one else is around them. That indicates they likely want privacy by being away from the crowds, and also they're likely having a very serious conversation here.
They've talked about separating before, and the last time they were together, he did choke her out and threaten to kill her and throw her overboard. So the fact that this is happening 2 years later is a little bit like, how can we not be suspicious when you've already said that this was going to happen?
Do you have that picture of your mom with bruises?
No, I don't.
Who has that picture?
One of her friends in Jackson.
How many times has she left him?
I know for sure of 2 times. One when I was in high school and one 2 years ago, just when he choked her out. That's what made her leave last time.
Lynette allegedly tried to leave Brian multiple times. Therefore, Lynette could have been trying to leave Brian again here.
Nothing but fighting since we bought the boat. Then he started turning to insults. So I packed my stuff and left.
And if we focus on breaking down their body language, Lynette is looking forward with her arms crossed, while Brian is facing towards her with his head down. What do you think their body language in this situation, context, and cluster indicate? Yes, it seems to be an imbalance in engagement in the conversation, where Lynette appears closed off or self-protected, while Brian, towards her, head down, may suggest avoidance, discomfort, or guilt. Although it's only one photo, you can kind of have a sense of what's going on in this situation. I think many of us have seen a situation like that, or may have even been a part of a situation like that, where the person that maybe has felt wronged has their arms crossed looking forward, and the person that feels like they may have done wrong is looking towards them and facing towards them in that situation. And together, the contrast in posture points to possible tension or lack of mutual connection in that moment.
It definitely seems weird because the timelines and the stories don't really add up.
Do you have a changed sense of Brian's story since you arrived here?
No, the story's been bullshit from the beginning.
We've thought it was sketchy the whole time. So just seeing it for in person, it just solidifies that it's sketchy to us.
Although Brian still claims his innocence, Brian is giving inconsistent information, which is a hallmark of a liar. Do you know why?
What was the last thing that you remember saying to each other?
Without going into a lot of details because of the ongoing investigation.
Yes, because they're constructing a story on the fly instead of recalling a real memory that actually happened. As pressure, evidence, or questioning mounts, those cracks show up as contradictions in details or timelines, as we're noticing here.
The wind blew me away from her and she swam to the sailboat and we lost sight of each other pretty quickly.
Why would she be swimming away from the boat? Why wouldn't she be swimming towards the dinghy?
Hooker initially told investigators Lynette fell off their dinghy in bad weather and that strong currents carried her away. He made no mention of the sailboat.
It's around 4:30, roughly. The gentleman came to the bar. His wife went straight down by the pool. So I didn't really see her, talk to her. The gentleman came up. He got 2 rum and cokes, Cuba Libres. He carried them down by the pool. Came back up about an hour, got 2 more from the other side of the bar, and he went back down by the pool.
The relationship has been rocky and it gets worse when they drink, so I'm just concerned that he made threats in the past, so I'm just trying to make sure that his anger didn't overtake him and he's done something that he can't undo. They were sober for about 1.5 years because they knew the problems that happen when they drink.
I only served them 4 drinks. Definitely didn't seem drunk.
We're now finding out that although Brian and Lynette were drinking, they weren't very drunk, which indicates if Brian did this, he would have possibly been more capable to carry out a more sophisticated crime. Given that Lynette has not been found already, there could be a much deeper plot of what happened between the two that evening. We're going to discuss soon about what that could specifically mean.
They don't have a key per se. What they have is a kill switch. And the kill switch it's basically a button, and then you have like a V-shaped, prong that goes over it, and it holds it out and it keeps the engine from cutting off on you. If that person goes over the side, they pull it, it'll shut the motor down immediately. And the reason why is they don't want you to get run over by your dinghy and get chopped up by the propeller. And you can still drive it even without that key. You'd have to hold that button out. A little bit weird about that situation.
Now we're finding out that keys to a dinghy aren't actually keys, but instead is just basically a little clip that clips into the little electric motor to allow the electric motor to stay on.
Yep, grocery time.
Delivery. It's a way of life, man.
Initially, Brian was claiming that Lynette took the keys when she bounced out of the dinghy and fell overboard. However, now we're finding out that you don't even really need keys to keep the engine of the dinghy on, but the clip is just there for a little bit of convenience and to allow for the engine to shut off if you happen to fall out of the dinghy. And a dinghy key is by no means like a key to a house or a car to prevent any theft. Therefore, Brian's story that he had to paddle his dinghy all the way back by hand and he couldn't use the engine may have been just a false alibi for him to buy time. Are you starting to notice a possible scenario of what happened to Lynette that evening?
2 orange life jackets that were there.
On the bottom of the floor of the dinghy?
Just on the floor of the dinghy. They just looked like every other orange life jacket I've ever seen in anyone's boat around here.
Oddly, both life vests were still in the dinghy. I mean, if you have someone who magically bounced out of your dinghy and they're getting swept out to sea, why would anybody just throw one flotation device towards them? Wouldn't you throw as many flotation devices as possible into the water for them to grab onto? Especially if that person who supposedly bounced out of the raft was not wearing a life vest.
We weren't wearing life jackets.
A person that you love and care for, you would throw everything and anything that floats towards them for them to grab onto as a flotation device so that they don't go under.
I threw her a flotation cushion that we used to sit on the dinghy, right after she went in. But I couldn't tell if she got it or not.
Just one? Why not all the seat flotation devices? I think there's many seats in there. Many of those seats act as a flotation device. Throw all of them towards her. You have all the life vests? Throw all the life vests at her. Everything. She's allegedly, according to Brian, she's getting swept out to sea without any flotation device. She doesn't have a life vest. And you just throw one flotation device towards her? Just one? Psychologically and behaviorally, it does not make any sense.
There was a spent flare gun.
And you could tell it had been fired.
Correct.
Yeah.
Said that he had at some point anchored his dinghy, fired a flare.
If someone fires a flare at 8 o'clock at night, it's dark here, would everybody see it and know, oh my God, there's a flare?
It's not probable, but it is possible that, he fired a flare and there was just nobody there to see it. But I would say it's pretty unlikely. If somebody sees a flare, word gets around and fire and rescue is notified. And we were not notified that night of any flares being set off.
Although it was reported that the person who saw the dinghy up close when Brian landed to shore said that there was one flare that was shot. But for all we know, Brian could have just shot that into the water. Also, just one flare? You're not shooting every flare that you have? If the person you love is supposedly being swept out to sea, and you just shoot one flare off, supposedly throw one seat cushion as a flotation device towards her, and then just be like, oh, okay, that's it, I did my part. Good luck. It doesn't make any sense for someone who says they love the person. This is their love of their life, their soulmate, and they're so sad that this person is gone.
My one job was to look out for her, and that has not happened. And I'm going to keep looking out for her now as best I can.
Nope. One seat cushion and one flare. That's all she got. The rest, okay. Time to paddle back to shore. And not just paddle back to the nearest shore, which would have been about a couple 100 feet towards I guess it'll be the east. No, he paddled all the way back about 4 miles to the west to supposedly get help.
He went all the way across to the Marsh Arbor, to one of the marinas on the other side. And that's about 4 miles. That is an incredibly long row.
Because they were navigating to their sailboat just up the coast a little bit. According to Brian, for him to get help, he paddles 4 miles across the bay. It makes no sense.
The way he spoke, it was just a little, he could have been in shock, but it was just very monotone, no expression, no voice inflections, no up, no down, no pitch.
They haven't found her yet, but they can now focus all of their efforts in a smaller area, and they're still out there searching today.
That's a little strange. He's not a monotone guy. He's very loud.
It's been 10 days. It's been a long time. I don't think I've ever been apart from her in 25 years. For this long.
Brian was known to be, throughout all of this, less emotional, and oddly now in TV interviews he's behaving very distraught, which indicates possible disingenuousness where he's playing the part of a loving husband who's trying to find his soulmate wife.
I want people to know that Lynette is my life, and we've been together almost half my life, and we belong to each other, and I mean to keep looking. My only focus is to go back to the boat and then hire or beg people to help me go find some areas to search.
Is that what's next for you?
That's what's next for me until my visa runs out.
If you're a suspect in your wife's disappearance and you just told the world your sole focus is finding her, it may not look great to then leave the place where she disappeared, because Brian Hooker today left the Bahamas where his wife Lynette vanished.
He said, well, I'll be around. I'm not leaving until I find her.
He said that to you too?
He did.
Not leaving till I find her.
Mm-hmm.
So were you surprised to find out yesterday he got on a plane and left?
I was, actually.
Now Brian Hooker leaves the Bahamas after saying he would stay to find her, which is common of those who commit these types of crimes. You know why?
I think it just shows his character on how much his word means. How do you say, I'm going to never stop searching for her, and then leave the next day to say you're going to go aid for your mom, which you know she's been sick for a while, so why now?
Yes, for perpetrators of these crimes, not necessarily saying Brian is the perpetrator, because everyone is innocent until proven guilty, but for perpetrators of these crimes, it's very difficult, dangerous, and exhausting to keep up the act of pretending to search for the person they really don't want to be found.
Wherever they're at, like, I have no inclination to where they're at right now. I like these shirts a lot.
When the person is found, it usually comes with it a treasure trove of information of how that person passed and who could be responsible.
They were at the house when I left. They were there.
They weren't there. They didn't leave. They vanished.
They were dead.
The only way they could have left is in your truck.
So naturally, the perpetrator of these types of crimes, if this is a crime, would not want the missing person to be found.
We still don't know what she was wearing that night. When we have people walking beaches and looking for things, we don't know what size shoe she was wearing, what color shoes she was wearing. He has a life that's out of control and he needs to go back to California. I'm not going to judge him for those things, but put somebody in charge. Give us the information we need to find Lynette while you can't do it.
Accidents and emergencies happen. We can't control if something is going on with his mom. But the fact that he is leaving and not giving anybody information about how to continue searching for her, it's disgusting. I just can't fathom that this could even be a response from somebody who says that he'll do anything to find his wife, but he can't even put somebody else in charge or give anybody any information about what they're looking for.
You had 3 minutes to give every detail you could so everybody on that island could help find Lynette. And you spent 3 minutes saying me, 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 me. Let's talk about Lynette. Where, when, why, what was she wearing? Did she have her glasses on? Did it have a band on it? What are we looking for on the beaches, Brian?
We see this consistently with the perpetrator in missing persons cases, where the entire community is slaving away, doing everything possible to find the missing person, while the loved one who committed the act is nowhere to be found.
Doing the things we can to get everybody involved. We could get the community involved. He knows about community outreach. He knows about the power of the people. That's been his message since I've met him. Every Facebook post he's put out is along those messages, and it's the one thing he's refused to do.
And if they are involved, they are often attempting to slow search efforts and moving loved ones to acceptance that the missing person will never be found.
It kind of seems like when he was texting me, he just wanted me to get over the fact that my mom's gone. Like, oh, we'll get through this, honey. Like, what? My mom's gone, and your story is not adding up. I'm not gonna just be on your side because you just want this swept under the rug.
He talked about boaters that were after the fact that came to his boat and said, hey, what can we do to help? And he's like, oh, well, there's really nothing to do. Obviously, those people came to him and wanted to help. And there's been no action on any of that on his part.
And they are specifically and tactically doing that to demoralize search efforts and hamper the possibility of the missing person from being found.
Brian said it's a 2-piece black bathing suit, but he didn't say she was wearing a green cover-up over it. And now from the picture, you can clearly see that she's wearing something else that he didn't mention to the police.
Also, by leaving the Bahamas, Brian is possibly thinking that he can evade arrest because the crime happened in the Bahamas and not in the United States. So there'd be more of a process in handing off cases that would be required to arrest Brian. Now, others who were boating that evening in that same area have come forward to testify that the weather was not rough at all.
The people that I know that were literally anchored the boat right next door to their boat said that the weather wasn't that bad and the seas weren't that rough.
Yeah, there was a normal sea breeze, but nothing more than that.
How far off land was it anchored?
200 yards?
200 yards.
I'd say, yeah. It wasn't, if you've got a...
I mean, that's basically that blue boat. Or maybe the white boat.
The white boat.
The white boat.
Elbow Cay was where their sailboat was docked, but instead he went all the way across the bay 4 miles to Marsh Harbor. Elbow Cay is just a little bit up on the coast from the Abaco Inn, but for some reason when Lynette bounced out of the dinghy for Brian to get help, instead of just rowing a couple 100 feet to shore, he supposedly decides, well, I'm not going to get help at the nearest location. He's going to get help at the furthest location across the bay 4 miles all the way to Marsh Harbor. It doesn't make any sense.
If you were in a small dinghy like they were, it's 8 feet, it's tiny, and you were coming out of the Abaco Inn, you kind of hug the land. You don't take the channel way out into the deeper water like the vessels that draw more, draft, then the little dinghies can pretty much scoot over, 2 feet of water.
Yeah, that's true.
So they'd be close to land as they were heading. They'd go as the crow flies to the yacht.
Most people would.
If they were truly in their little dinghy raft making their way up towards their sailboat, they would be hugging the coast. They would not be all the way out at sea. Their water beneath their little dinghy would be no more than just a few feet deep.
And the change of tide, if they were out there at that time, they were probably in a slack tide. So it should have been, for her, an easy swim to shore. If she's that seasoned of a sailor, she should be a good swimmer. And it's not all that deep there. Now, granted, 6 feet deep of water is, you're not walking on the bottom, but there was nowhere that they were more than a mile away from water that could have got down to as low as 1.5 feet, where she could have got to and stood up.
Whether it was 8 feet deep beneath them or 6 feet, it would be no more than just a couple minutes swim to where they can walk on land and walk to shore.
Just doesn't add up. My mom is very fit and strong. She's a good swimmer.
There's no reason for their little dinghy to be way out into the bay.
The water, it was high tide, but it seemed like the water was shallow enough where they could at least touch it sometimes. So that's where I'm confused on why he didn't jump in, because he's pretty tall. So I'm just confused why he didn't jump into.
Well, the more confusion comes from why didn't they follow the shoreline? Why didn't they go outside of those pilings? A small boat doesn't have to be in deeper water to operate. He could have followed the shore the whole way.
There's no reason for that at all if their sailboat is just up the coast and their little dinghy can operate in just a foot of water too, so it doesn't even matter. Like in some boats, you need very deep water for the boat to operate because otherwise you'll scrape on the ocean floor. But with a dinghy, you can operate the dinghy in basically 2 feet of water.
She's a strong swimmer, right?
Yes.
As is he. I think I saw that he's a Marine.
Yes.
Also, even if someone falls out of their little dinghy raft that only goes 2 miles per hour, it's likely just about a couple minutes swim where they can stand up and then simply walk ashore. Interestingly, it took Brian supposedly 9 hours to paddle just 4 miles in his dinghy.
But you think it would take 9 hours to float? Let's cut 1 hour off for the getting through the bramble and all the rest. So 7.5, 8 hours to float all that way in a wind?
The fact of the matter is with a chain of poor decisions, it could have taken somebody that long. Not likely, but not impossible. Just drifting with the wind, that I'm estimating would have taken 3 or 4 hours.
3 or 4 hours. About half the time that he says it took.
Yeah.
Therefore, there seems to be a time gap of at least 7 hours that something went on in those 7 hours. In criminal cases, these types of gaps in time are very common. Do you know why?
The timeline that he gave, not not probable.
Yes, it's because they're leaving out a big piece in time where they committed the crime and then also covered up the crime. Fabricated alibis of trying to make up for that time is a hallmark in these types of missing persons cases.
Loaded my stuff up in my coolers, my water jugs, my book bag, my computers, some of the tools that I had in the toolbox. I knew I was going to have to do some pumping unit rubbers today.
Keep in mind, this is just 12 hours later. He's now watching himself, for the first time, cover up his murders, with a police officer watching along with him. Chris looks away completely in defeat because he knows all video evidence points to him. And the fabricated alibi that they often tell is extremely extraordinary and completely unbelievable and dramatic. A hallmark of these cases is that their story is usually very far-fetched. It's because they need to make up something completely extraordinary, completely out of the norm, completely usually quite impossible. And what is impossible a lot of times is trying to make it seem like they're innocent, where they need to convince everybody of a very far-fetched situation.
Most of the places the cruisers hang out, including Marsh Harbor, which is where they were, it's buffeted on the outside, on the Atlantic Ocean side, by an island. Actually several island chains, and then barrier reefs. And then you have the main island on the inside. So it's very, I'd say you do have some containment and some shelter in there. And that's why it's hard. That's why a lot of people are very suspect. She should have been able to be found, especially if the timelines matched up.
Isn't it quite odd that Lynette's remains sadly haven't been found yet?
Did about a 40-degree cone of where she went over.
Measuring the wind out,
and
the possibilities of the wind.
Correct.
Right? You'd see a body if a body was in there, right? So clear. The water's so
certainly
shallow
believe
and clear.
so. The water's pretty clear around here and fairly shallow. So
there were also drones up, and there was aircraft and sonar that was used.
U.S. Coast Guard did bring an aircraft over. They flew a grid as well from Marsh Harbor to where she fell out of the boat originally.
This case has gotten extensive coverage. You even have the U.S. Coast Guard looking. Everyone's looking, and she hasn't been found yet. Do you know what that possibly means? Given the inconsistencies in Brian's story and also the improbabilities in Brian's story.
Brian says that Lynette went over with the dry bag, with the passports, and I think the extra spare key to the electric engine. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't a dry bag float?
Yes, it would.
And it hasn't been found anywhere.
We've nobody's, to the best of my knowledge, nobody's found that.
It's becoming more and more likely that Lynette is sadly buried ashore. We have a major time span that seems unlikely, a broken oar, and then maybe a missing oar. It's possible Brian broke the oar when he was digging a shallow grave, sadly for Lynette. And sadly what occurred mostly in those 9 hours when Brian said that he spent all those 9 hours just rowing to shore when it would probably take a lot less time than 9 hours. It was possibly when Brian was committing the crime and then also covering up the crime. At this point, it's becoming more and more likely that Lynette will be found on land and not in water. And if she is found in water, she may sadly be found weighted down in water. But the fact that they haven't found her yet in water after they were doing such a thorough job looking for her and everyone's on the lookout for her and they still haven't found her, it's becoming more and more likely that she's sadly buried on land.
We haven't had any instances in the last 10 years of anybody going missing at sea and not being found. It's pretty well known that there are sharks in the area. It's very rare that they attack anybody. There's only been one shark attack here in 15 years.
I think he did something to her and threw her in. He might have did something to her. They got to the boat, and then when he moved it, dumped her out at sea maybe. I don't know.
But nothing good. You don't believe a word of his story.
No.
Did police ever explicitly ask you if you hurt your wife?
Of course.
What did you say to them?
I said I've never harmed Lynette, and I never would harm Lynette, and I want to find Lynette.
Remember, everyone is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Now in the comments, what do you think of Brian Hooker's story of what he claims happened to Lynette? Let everyone know in the comments below. Subscribe for more. And if you want exclusive content and channel perks, hit that join button now below, because your support makes all of this possible. Maybe similar to you, when I first heard about this case, I was like, someone falling overboard and they just getting lost at sea. Maybe that's possible. I don't know. But then as I started to look more and more into the case and see all the evidence and how everything happened and Brian's story and all the evidence, yeah, every time more evidence comes out, it's not in favor of Brian. It is looking really bad for Brian and sadly very bad for Lynette too. See you next time.